Hello and welcome to Higher Ed Live, the live weekly web show all about the world of higher education. I am your host, Seth Odell, coming to you live from Manchester, New Hampshire. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight and being a part of the show. As always, tonight's show we're talking all about expectations of college-bound teens. And you have most likely seen the now famous annual No Levitt survey. It always comes out every year talking about what college-bound teens are looking for. It's always kind of that one big data dump I'm looking for every year, trying to capture it. But the thing is, when you read the survey, if you've read it, I'll pull it up so you can take a quick look at it. There's a lot of stuff in here, and they do a great job at summarizing it, but it always, to me, leaves always even more questions than answers. There's just so much to talk about. So what I wanted to do tonight, as what I've done in the past, is bring on the one and only Stephanie Geyer, who we'll bring on in just a second, to kind of talk about that. Yes, we got the numbers from the survey, but what's next? What's more? Let's look at what's going on and kind of have a conversation about that. But first, as always, let's thank the sponsors that help make Higher Ed Live possible. Higher Ed Live is sponsored by Integral, the creators of the Schools app on Facebook, a private Facebook community to boost enrollment and retention. Check out a really interesting article they have on how to welcome transfer students with social media. We're also sponsored by Omni Update. They are the leading web content management system CMS provider for higher education. The company's web CMS, it's called OU Campus. It's secure, scalable, it's got great tools, features, deployment flexibility, and an awesome user community. In fact, you can check out how Elizabethtown College utilized that to capitalize on web content reuse for storytelling. Great article out there on the Twitter sphere, hashtag Higher Ed Live. We're also sponsored by Scavenger, a Google-funded mobile game about going places, doing challenges, and even, well, earning points. Check out how one Australian school used Scavenger for their physical education program. That's right in the physical ed program. And one student said, well, it was truly an adventure. Find out why as well. Great article going on there. And finally, we are sponsored by the great folks at Converge Consulting, a measurable multi-channel marketing firm where they help their clients strategize, execute, and analyze their marketing results. Check out their upcoming Google Analytics workshops. Link went out on the back channel for that as well. So once again, guys, welcome to Inside E-Expectations, our now annual show. It's a tradition, I would say, where we dive deep into the Noel Levitt's research to figure out exactly what are college-bound teens thinking, what is it that they really want from us, and how can we do our best to deliver that? Well, to answer that and go beyond just the numbers on the surface of the actual report, we got to bring on one of the folks behind it. And it's the one and only Stephanie Geyer, Associate Vice President for Web Strategy and Interactive Marketing Services at No Levitt. So, Stephanie, welcome back to Higher Ed Live.
Seth, thanks so much. It's about as much fun as a geeky girl like I can have. So,
well, I'm really happy to have you on the show. Really excited about it. Again, as I said, I love the report. I read it each year. I know lots and lots of folks, thousands of folks, look to this as kind of a benchmark where are things at, especially when it comes to trends comparing to previous years. I can't be alone, I'm sure, in saying, well, what's next? Well, how come the people are thinking that? Is that really the way it works? And having a great big conversation that will last likely months from now and potentially impact a lot of decisions. So as we dive into that, because I have an army of questions ready to be deployed your way. First, why don't you just tell us a little bit about the report in general? Who produces it? What are the goals? Who participates? Just for folks that maybe potentially aren't familiar.
Sure. E-Expectations has been a part of my work at Noel Levitt since 2005, and I have some really great partners to thank. You've already mentioned. And then finally, very wonderful people at College Week Live who help us, sometimes implementing in our trend report, but also funding and helping direct the focus for our studies. So definitely need to shout out to those fine folks. This year, we decided that we wanted to study what was going on with juniors versus seniors, and we had some guesses about how juniors might be a little bit different than seniors, and some of those things panned out and some of them didn't. It was kind of interesting to see a little more homogeneity than I expected between those two markets. Another piece of this study this year that I was especially tickled about is that we ran a parallel research piece at Noel Levitt's called E-Recruitment Practices, where we went out and talked to 250 or so, I think maybe a little more than that, folks from marketing and admissions offices from colleges and universities around the U.S. so that we could look at the data from the student's perspective and see, hey, what are the kids saying that they're doing? Now what are the marketers and the grown-ups saying that they're doing?
And that's huge, I think, to be able to connect what we're trying to do with how it's actually working. And I think that's a really interesting step. And I agree, the junior-senior comparisons were kind of interesting, too. Let's kick this off talking about kind of the big subject matter that's been this way for years, which has been the role of the web. And what did you guys find this year that stayed the same? What changed? I mean, some of the big stuff, obviously, is that 50% of students said the web played a significant role in their decision to apply to a school. I wonder if some people, maybe myself included, thought that number would be higher, but what were some initial kind of results on just generally the role of the web as far as how it's viewed from a college-bound teen?
It's an important resource for them for sure, and we saw some data that suggests that they're continuing to use multiple assets to help them in their decision-making process. So in terms of the role for that particular data point, it was about what I expected. Very few, just 15%, saying that it had little role or none at all for both segments, about that, maybe even a little bit less. I thought something that was really interesting that we did differently in this study this year was just to understand about what would happen if a student had a crummy experience on a school's website. And we had a guess that maybe the influence of that bad experience would be different depending on the mindset of the student about the school before they started looking at the site. So we came up with these three kind of different scenarios where, as you can imagine, there might be a school that they're thinking about that they're really gung-ho about, like they've wanted to go to since they were little, or it's in their backyard and it's a foregone conclusion, or whatever. And then the next scenario was a school where maybe they just had some interest, maybe it's their B-list school, or somebody that it's just the school that they're kind of casually interested in. And then that third category, which turned out to be the most dangerous for our colleges and universities, is when the school has been recommended by somebody else. So if you've got a crummy website and people are recommending your school, you could potentially be in some big trouble. It was about 70% of the respondents in that scenario who said, if somebody said that I should go look at this school, and I go look at the school site and it's not a great experience, 70% said, I'm going to have a severely diminished or significantly diminished opinion of that institution. And I thought, wow, now how do we measure their intentionality about the school as they're looking at the site? It's like getting smell coming out of the web. It's the holy grail of web development. I don't see it happening just yet.
I agree, not yet, but that was such an interesting point. I think, from my own perspective, at SNHU, we're an institution that's growing really quickly, and we have found that the vast amount of our growth is being spurred organically, which we are still attributing to like organic growth, word of mouth. We'll see one person from a certain employer come, and then within 6 months or a year, we'll now have 5, 6, 7. We would associate organic growth coming as being what's spurring our major growth. And now when I see that data, it makes me wonder, well, if someone's hearing about it and they're getting recommended from somebody, and the web is playing a major role for someone who's that's growing, or an institution that wants to grow, that plays a huge role, because I do think that at the end of the day, word of mouth is still a huge aspect in enrollment, and I totally agree that if students are being recommended, this is definitely something worth checking out, and then they go and we're seeing it, it leads to the question of the web experience is maybe even more valuable in that aspect than we realized.
Totally. I think so too. And I also think, and there's no data directly in the study, this is just my own hypothesis, but I also think that we as web consumers have really elevated our expectation of customer service through the web. It's not just brochureware where we're expecting to click and read, but an experience where we are expecting to engage in some way, and we have expectations of the quality of that experience, the follow-up, what it means. So, filling out a form online and not getting a clear sense of whether or not the form went through is, I think, a much more devastating experience for a prospective student now than it was, say, 5 or 6 years ago when we started this research.
I totally agree. And one of the other areas that jumped out at me, too, where students were a little upset, was that I think it was 55% of respondents said that difficulty with site navigation was among one of the greatest challenges encountered. Talk to me a little bit about that number. That seems like more than half of people that go to a website say that's one of the biggest problems. And talk to me, it seems to me, again, website management and governance is not an easy task, but that's the kind of thing that we can potentially change. We can, if they're saying they're having a hard time navigating, we can help make that a smoother process. So this seems to be like one area where a switch can be made or maybe more focus needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think for me, the ironic thing is when I go to campus to help a client work on their website or at least study what's happening with the users, that they complain, hey, people are saying they can't find anything. And so navigation, I think, is always going to be tricky. It's pretty subjective. And again, like I was positing before, gosh, it'd be great if every website could automatically detect the mindset and maybe the skill set and capability of the user coming in. I don't know that we're getting there anytime soon, but that navigation piece was especially challenging for the juniors than the seniors, much more so. And so I think that that's an interesting piece to remember, that the juniors aren't terribly sophisticated in their research ability. It goes to prefrontal cortex development and, all kinds of physiology and psychology to think about there. But I suspect that if we were to watch a student, maybe a junior, looking at a college or university seriously for looking at their website for the first time, and then we looked at them in a second instance and a third, we might see significant gains in their abilities to do this. And so when we did this study and we were talking to those juniors, it was back in March and April of their junior year. And a lot of them hadn't really entered into the fray in terms of doing this work intentionally. I have my own high school senior here home at now at my house, and it's been a funny experience to see the web through her eyes. And some of that is reflected in the results or maybe the question constructs in this particular study. And as a junior, even though her mom lives and breathes higher ed web marketing for a living, she's kind of a Luddite and, not super tech savvy. And so it was interesting to see what she wasn't understanding when she was looking in. So I think the juniors definitely have some challenges in terms of sophistication and awareness, but I also saw in terms of differences that kind of generally they were more enthusiastic about, I'd say, more complex technologies. Like I know we're going to talk about webcasts and live chat and QR codes and mobile. And generally, the juniors were almost always more excited about that than the seniors.
And that's really interesting to think about, too, and talking about the different stages that they're in and being able to try and target that a little better. That is really interesting. So the last two things about the web before we move on to the next part of the conversation is, this is a pain subject for a lot of folks, but I did think the net price calculator information that you guys found was really interesting. I mean, it was shocking how few students use the net price calculator, and then the reason why they didn't. So why don't you share a little bit about that not only are students not using net price calculators, but what's the reason they're citing as why that's not a tool that they're using?
Yeah, it's because we, as the grown-ups, are afraid to talk about money still. And now that we've been forced to put these calculators out there, we've decided that that's even more challenging. And so 74% of the students in the study this year said they couldn't find them. That's why they didn't use them. And I know from conversations with dear clients and colleagues that, sometimes they just elect to bury the link in a pretty obscure spot or mask it with a kind of obscure name. I disagree with that strategy. I think that you need first and foremost to make sure that you have a calculator that works. And by that, I mean not just simply complies with the federal mandate to deliver net price, but also works to position your institution and your financial aid and scholarship opportunities based on student input. And so I think that there's a way to do it right and well. And I've seen it done. We have clients that are doing it now. And we also see that after a student completes the calculator, they can become more engaged and more interested in attending the school. So I know, especially for private schools, the concept is, well, we've got to sell them on how great we are before we scare them with the sticker price. Guess what? If they're looking at your institution, they're going to figure out pretty quickly if you're a private school, and they're going to have some assumptions about cost even before they get to your web page. So why not take a more progressive approach and say, hey, yeah, we are a private school, but let's do a little education about what that means. Let's talk about the realities of scholarship funding on our campus, the percentage of students who get aid. Hey, how about if we introduce some through video or even a photo testimonial or something like that?
I couldn't agree more. My main point with that, too, is always that students want access to information so they can make an informed decision, and it's our responsibility to give them that. Now, I get net press calculators is a huge can of worms. We've had a whole show based on it here. I know it's not that easy, but I think it's something that needs to be revisited. If 70% of students that don't use it say it's because they can't find it, are we just burying a problem out back rather than digging it up and dealing with it? I think that's what needs to be done.
Oh, I think that's a great way to put it, and I think that coyness just doesn't pay off for anybody. It's really not productive.
Totally agree. Couldn't agree more. And that said, let's move on to a really interesting subject. So earlier before the show, I sent out a tweet that said brochures over mobile. And the one and only and talented Rachel Rubin was weighing in on Twitter asking me to let's talk about brochures over mobile. So to get into that conversation and why I would say such an oddly worded tweet, let's start with mobile in general. What was some of the stuff that you guys found with students utilizing mobile? How many students are actually using mobile devices in the recruitment process, and how are they using it?
Well, so a couple of things about how I worded the question, and this actually came from my 6th grader, not my 12th grader. Last year we asked, and in previous years we've asked, do you have a mobile phone? And now with tablets coming onto the scene, I thought about what happens with my own iPad here in the Geyer household, and I thought about my own children, some of whom have their own mobile devices and some of whom don't or didn't at the time I did the survey. And I realized that even though that middle school kid didn't have a mobile device, she was so frequently on my iPad, and now the 3rd grader is too, that, hey, they're pretty mobile savvy. So this year we asked the question, how do you have regular access to a mobile device? And it was more than 2/3 who said yes. And of those, 20% said that they had a tablet. Now, we had asked that question just about a year ago in a College Week Live focus study from their database, and it was only 4%. So after the holiday season, you can see that a lot of kids got Hanukkah or Christmas presents in the form of a tablet or Kindle or iPad or whatever. Now, of those who had regular access to a mobile device, more than half, 52%, said that they had already looked at a college or university website using that particular tool. And we thought that was interesting because when we went into the higher ed e-recruitment practices study to see what the grown-ups were telling us about whether or not they'd optimize their site for mobile, it was pretty abysmal. Just the highest number, 39% of four-year publics, 35% of four-year privates, and only 7% of the two-year schools in our study said that they'd done anything about mobile. So I think significant opportunity there. I think a pretty big gap in terms of what we are dishing out to users who are only going to increase their use of mobile. I promise you. I mean, even if you go into Google Analytics and look at your data and say, oh, it's only 3 or 5%, look at the percentage increase just in the past 30 days or the past 6 months, and it's going to knock your socks off.
And I've seen that a lot with like video views has gone up almost a percentage a month over month for over a year now, which has been pretty interesting. So one of the things I think is interesting though is when you look at if mobile is growing and being a player, how are we executing it if we're executing it? As you said, a lot of folks simply aren't, which is a scary thing. But let's talk about what content people want. So if these students are saying, I'm using a mobile device, I'm accessing it, what are they actually looking for? Because one of the interesting things that I found was that only 4% of the students, according to the survey, said they wanted campus life information. And yet, most of the mobile sites I see still have very similar content to the traditional desktop homepage, which has the big campus life or student experience buttons. And only 4% of the perspective said that's the content they cared about when they went on a mobile device. So I thought that was interesting. What are your thoughts on the kind of content that these college-bound teens are saying they want to find on a mobile device?
I think that they're much more action-oriented. I mean, they might be looking in to check a date Maybe they've got their mobile phone or their tablet and they're coordinating schedules. I mean, I sure do think that that's a huge part of their lives now in terms of their electronic engagement is just managing their time. And so, imagine the user going into a mobile site to say, okay, when is that next open house that I'm trying to get to for this particular school, and how does that connect with my work schedule is a scenario I'd think about. I'd say that they're also probably just looking to confirm list of majors, and they're probably looking to answer the money question too. In previous studies, we've asked a little bit more directly and in some different ways to have them rate engagement with content on a mobile site, and we see a little bit more granularity in the results there. But I was always surprised to see that they want to fill out forms on these devices. I personally, with my bifocals at the age that I am, don't find that a particularly enjoyable activity, but those with better eyesight and maybe tinier, pointier fingers are better at it.
And so one of the other things that we found that's surprising to some to not, is I think it was the data on QR codes. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, are QR code, is the data still out? I mean, is the ruling still out? Because I read it and I said, forget it. Nobody's using these things. I saw a panel over the summer and 15 students were there, and one student said they used it, and 4 said, what is it? What are your thoughts? Are QR codes useful? I mean, because if they are, I have to be honest, I feel like they're being used wrong then, because they just seem to be kind of thrown everywhere. So sell me on, our students using that, and if so, I mean, how do we actually make that work? Because it seems like a bit of a broken execution thus far.
I think we do need to curb our enthusiasm when it comes to QR codes. It was interesting to see, 67%, the four-year privates especially, were the most enthusiastic from e-recruitment practices, but just 17% of the juniors, 13% of the seniors said that they were ever using them. Of course, we also have a subset there of kids who have a mobile device that can read a QR code at the moment that they're experiencing one from, whether it's a publication or... Good gravy. I had my kids out at Perkins the other day, and there was a QR code on my 8-year-old daughter's cup of lemonade. Why? I don't get it. Obviously, that's not a higher ed example, but I just looked at it and thought, this is crazy. Like, really, we need to simmer down. I do like them when they have a little Easter egg. When there is something charming and new and fresh that I couldn't get anywhere else. Mm-hmm. But I have become less willing to try them out to see if that little chocolatey surprise is there on the other side, because I'm so often disappointed.
And so when we talk about trying new things, QR codes is something that fell into the lap of higher ed marketers over the last few years, and we've been, as an institution or industry, trying it and putting it out there and putting work into it. So, I mean, when you look at the usage results, I'd have to think that we're not getting the payout. But it brings up the question that I want to pose, because it's coming in from Rachel, talking about brochures. So let's shift gears entirely now, and let's say, okay, the cool new mobile trends, maybe they're not really panning out just yet. But what about old school traditional? Let's talk about brochures, because this to me is a big deal that we really can't lose focus, because what were the data that you saw about good old-fashioned, nice heavy cardstock brochures? Like, where did that come in usage?
I wish I could step away for a moment. Just 3 feet from my left arm right now is a giant cardboard box of all of the stuff that my high school senior has been receiving from last year until this, and every day, in fact, yesterday, I went to the mail, and there were 7 pieces of mail. 6 of them were from you nice people, and 1 of them was from King Soopers and had some coupons from me. That's what was in my mail yesterday. Crazy. So in our study, we asked, what is the first source of information that you go to help build your list? And the number 1 and number 2 results were brochures and college guidance counselors. And you could have knocked me over with a feather when I first read that data come through. I thought, really? Is this 1991 when I started my career in higher ed? What is going on? In one of the presentations of this data that I gave earlier this summer, it might have been at EduWeb, somebody said, golly, is it kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy? Do they put importance on these tools, on these brochures, because we keep sending them to them? I don't know. I think there's something to that. But I don't know that there are a lot of marketers out there, a lot of admissions folks out there necessarily that are willing to let go. And I am not saying print is dead. Don't get me wrong. But I thought that by the time my kids got into this particular stage, that I wouldn't be hearing the same horror stories. I wouldn't be experiencing this mess that I am with 6 pieces of mail for my kid and 1 piece of mail for me, for schools that, you know, frankly, I've never even heard of. So how they're getting her, I don't know. It's something. I think that we need to balance and moderate. And, you know, I would say also begin experimenting, if you haven't already, with search engine marketing, paid interactive marketing strategies too.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in just a second. We need to. The brochure one was so interesting to me. The numbers were shocking, and it brings up another point, kind of, that I had heard earlier in the summer from another survey they've been put out. That was, I mean, this was at an event with students, and there was like 15 students, and 14 of them said that they selected a school that they knew about before they started their college search process, but that they also were getting paid. They also then valued brochures and said, they literally said, I like looking at it, and then at the same time they made fun of it and mocked it at this thing. It was a very interesting presentation, and it made me wonder, is the role of brochures to be direct response and to get students to go to the website in order to maybe get them to go to a campus visit, or is it some level of really low barrier to entry due to cost branding where we're trying to just make sure the student knows our name? And it's interesting because you're so right about the self-fulfilling prophecy thing, because if this matters to students, we have to do it, but does it only matter to students because we do it? And is it the fact that, like, well, if they're going to get 20 other schools in their mailbox, you better at least be in their mailbox, like, just because everybody else is there too. And it's like, are we all going to the same party just because everybody else got invited, but we all hate the DJ, but we're going to keep going anyway? And like, it's just, I don't know what I think about it, but the reality is, if students think it's valuable, my question then is not so much that really our brochures, you know, way better than cell phones, but maybe my thing is that when's the last time, and I'm saying this at myself, not anybody else, but when's the last time we as an industry pulled everybody into a meeting and said, what's some cool, new, awesome stuff we can do with brochures that didn't involve QR codes in it? Like, that's not the answer. You can't slap a stamp on it. But, like, could you do cards that specifically prompt to go to town halls? Could you do other things or interesting things with a brochure that can actually inspire a student and make your brand stand out? I don't know the answer to that, but I have to think that if students think it matters, maybe it's time we rethink it. Because besides just giving it a nice, newer picture of 4 students under a tree, I'm not sure we're doing a whole lot different. And I don't know. It's just this weird conundrum. I'm totally on the brochure bandwagon right now, though. I'm like, let's go. I'm going to go in the office and be like, guys, let's talk about the newest hip thing, paper brochures. And they're going to laugh, but I'm going to be like, we can do something cool or different with this. I think we can. I think there's still hope.
I applaud your ideas. I think that it would be fun to challenge our community, Seth, to share with us their most innovative and engaging and still feasible ways to deal with brochures. I did see there's something on my desk back at the office, and I'm going to be in so much trouble for not remembering the name of the institution. I think it might be Dominican, and I think it's the Dominican in California. And I got a brochure. John Borowski, if you're listening, I'm sorry, I don't remember what school you're at. But anyway, it was his campus brochure. And this brochure had a cutout of their D logo, which has kind of this starburst thing going on. And it was a tie-in with social media. Have you heard of this?
No, I have not.
Okay, so here's the thing that you do. You're supposed to take this cutout, this die cut of the D, with your cell phone and hold the die cut in front of your cell phone, and then take a picture of something that has to do with something related to your enrollment at that school. That was a long way to go to explain that.
No, but it's also a long process.
Did you get it?
It's a long process to get students to go through. I mean, I get it to an extent. I think asking students to jump over a hurdle when accepted, it makes sense. I know like Emerson did the sending a beanie to accepted students and put the hat on and post it, and it's a way to build community after the fact. But that's the one thing with augmented reality. People talk about augmented reality, and to me, the biggest thing is just students need. Well, students. Okay, I don't want to say what students need. Students want information. Your data keeps showing that they want to be able to go to your website and find out information they want. The campus life's important, yes, but they want to find information. And it really is it to make them jump 17 steps through a hoop. I just can't see that as being that important. Even if it works, are you really marketing an institution? Or are you just catering to the top 3% that were already going to come anyway? Because the only ones that are emotionally invested enough to spend 10 minutes holding up die cuts and taking pictures of themselves and posting it online. It's a great thing to do, but to me that's more increasing brand affinity among those that would have already come. So if you're looking to boost your enrollment or your yield, I just don't see that kind of a campaign doing it, even though those are the sexy campaigns so many of us kind of end up talking about.
I think I'm in huge, big trouble for talking about that. But, so if you're from that institution that we may be possibly just dissed, my apologies. I think I need to go back and read the brochure. And, hey, if you've got data about how this thing is working, I would love to say, it was interesting. It caught my attention. So I'd like to know more about it.
Well,
I think that your concept, though, is ways to make brochures relevant, engaging, and I think get that viral bit in is the way to go. And
I will say to their defense, the institution, I will say if it caused you to notice it out of the 20 others in your mailbox, you're right. Maybe it's not so much whether or not they actually take the step, but the fact that they at least acknowledge that they've been invited to do so. So I agree that anything that makes you stand out, I will back off a little bit and agree with that because that's a very fair point. Anything that's not the same static picture all the time. So that's brochures, but there's still so much to talk about. So let's talk about an aspect we discussed in social media. There's some changes in numbers a little bit. I saw kind of Twitter taking a big jump this year. Google Plus, I was like, what? So what's going on with social media this year with the data that you guys have seen coming in?
Yeah. So I think the headlines are this. Facebook, keep at it, but maybe understand a little bit more about the actual value or currency of a click. And I'll circle back around and talk about that in a sec. Twitter, I think finally getting into more of the mainstream at 27% now, but it took them, 3 or 4 years to get there, at least in the kind of longitudinal look at this particular study. I started asking about Twitter in 2009, and 3 students said that they were using Twitter at all, not even relative to higher ed. So now, 2009 to 2012, we're up to 27%. I think it's not a bad idea to be working through your Twitter strategy now if you haven't already, or maybe refining it. I know a lot of schools are out there, especially with athletic stuff. But and then Google Plus, holy crow, who knew, right? So their first opportunity to be for us to ask about in this study, and they enter the field at 19% and 10% of those Google Plus users saying that they're looking at schools in this venue. I think that it's an interesting place. I think it's like kind of a familiar place, but not as fully engaging as Facebook. I'm not using my big words here, but I don't know. I'm still stumbling around a little bit with it myself.
Yeah.
Are you a Google Plus user?
I'm not, and I'm very on the fence. I'll say, data's data, so I'm going to take it very seriously. I'm not going to dismiss it. It's raised a major flag when I read that in your report. So it's made me think, okay, I got to take this more seriously. Did I run out the gate and fire up the university's Google Plus page? No, I didn't. No, again, my institution's more adult learners. Maybe that's different. Maybe it's an age issue. But I don't know. It's making me wonder. I don't have a response to it yet. I'm kind of got to ponder and think about it for 2 reasons. One, because I just can't imagine that's the rate students are really using it at. But again, I'm thinking about it from my perspective, so I could definitely be wrong in that case. And in that case, I need to rethink it. But the other aspect that makes me question Google Plus is that it does have the potential to play a huge role in SEO. So, now if I see that prospective students are there, and the more I work towards that and building a community of people plus wanting my content, I also get a kickback in SEO. That does seem like there was this added benefit. And that brings me to the next conversation, which is SEO then. Where are you seeing that fit in this conversation? Because that, I think, is definitely the cousin or sibling to the Google Plus conversation.
It's huge, really. I mean, if we go back to that question about how students are formulating their initial list of schools that they're going to look at, Google, Bing, or Yahoo search was 67%. It was second behind brochures in the thing category as opposed to the people category. So, holy crow! I mean, you've got to be thinking about search engine optimization, and you don't need to be worrying too much about meta tags. You know, they serve a purpose for other reasons than SEO, and I think that they're good form and practice for a lot of reasons in site dev, but content that's working really well for Google and working really well for humans is the goal. And I'll tell you what, it's where my team works the hardest. I'm bringing on more writers all the time because so many of our clients just don't have the bandwidth to do it for themselves. And it's a heavy lift. I mean, it takes research, it takes discipline, and it also takes the ability to write for the web, to write for humans, to write for search engines. And it's tough business.
I could not agree more. I definitely think it's an interesting piece to this puzzle. And then backing up for 2 seconds to social media, I have to say, Patrick Powers says, when's No Levitt's going to add in MySpace back to the study? And I think that's a good question because I called it like I saw it. MySpace is back. I don't care what anybody says. I'm jumping ship. I'm going back. JT brought it back, and I'm with him. The launch video this week was so gorgeous. I was like, oh my, and it felt like I was a teenager again, and I loved it.
Well, my deep and abiding respect for both you and Patrick. Game on. I'm in.
Yes, there we go. In fact, it's going to be a MySpace-only study, but it would just be sponsored by Higher Ed Live. It'll just be me calling up some random people. So,
you know what, Seth, you can call my daughter. Do you want to? We'll put her in.
There we go. I'm going to have to fire it back up. So, Patrick, great question, man. Shifting gears once again to another piece of data that shocked me a little bit. I am a big proponent, supporter, cheerleader for the virtual campus tour, for saying why must a visit be a barrier to entry for a student to find out more information. And it's not, and it does work to some extent, but the numbers came in this year and I was kind of like, a little sad. Like, this is not, I thought I was all like, this is the thing. And then I was like, well, maybe not. So where are the numbers at with virtual tours versus maps? How are students using them, and what's the real information they're trying to get out of it when they use something like that?
Yeah. I can imagine, given your home institution's focus, that this virtual tour thing lines right up, and so I feel your pain. If I look back longitudinally, we've been asking about virtual tours for a long time, and it really hasn't ever crept above the 50-60% mark in terms of engagement. It's always been kind of in that 40-ish in terms of having viewed or viewed a virtual tour or used an interactive campus map. This year was 43%. So why not? Well, I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes schools put them in a bucket that's a little hard to find. And, I was talking about that coyness with calculators before. I've actually arm wrestled with admissions directors, marketing directors about putting the virtual tour link in kind of the page or package that goes with the campus visit. And their argument, which I disagree with, is, oh, well, if I give them a virtual tour link, then they aren't actually going to come to campus for real. Couldn't be more wrong. I think the virtual tour can whet their appetite, especially if you connect it in really well with calls to action that drive them to then set up that actual campus-based visit is the best strategy. When we look at e-recruitment practices, we see that 52% of four-year publics are the highest users in the virtual tour category, and then in the interactive maps, they're also the highest at 44%. So use on the school side is about commensurate with the student side. I think that when they're done well, they can be super fun and engaging and really rewarding and drive students to go to campus. And, you know, it's still true. When I started my career in 1991, one of the first things I learned was get those little bodies on campus and you exponentially increase their likelihood to enroll, unless you're an online school. But that's still true. I mean, you still have to make that connection. And I don't know. I'd like to see more of it. I think that there's some cool stuff out there. The folks at Concept 3D, I think, do some really cool interactive map work that I like a lot. Harvard Business School was just looking at theirs yesterday, and they have a lot of curated tours in Harvard Business School's interactive map that I think are really sweet and worth taking a look at.
And I think interesting point coming from Mike Petroff in the back channel. You know, a big opportunity for admissions is the integration of virtual elements to an in-person tour, enhancing the experience in person, which I think is an interesting point. And I will counter that too and say one of the things I do think, because we did a show on campus tours way back in the day actually with the one and only Mike Petroff almost a year ago. And one of the things we talked about was, you know, there is the campus tour that's the map experience. How big is campus, which is the biggest thing that students using maps ask for, or tours. And then there's the virtual tour as far as just providing a lively student life experience where it's, you know, I wonder if a virtual tour is done correctly, if a student always knows it's a virtual tour, or if it's student life and then it's like browse by club and interests and organizations and explore campus and in a way where it's not map-based too. So maybe I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to do. I think there's a step from doing a virtual tour and then just doing a really great integrated effort on your website to provide an interactive experience with what's the campus culture like. And I think if you do it really right, I wonder if you do maybe supersede the idea of it just being a tour. And I'd like to think maybe that's the reason we're seeing a little bit too. You know, if folks are doing that, and if not, I think that's a great opportunity to do something different.
So first of all, hey Mike, I'm glad you're here, and I hope that your pasta isn't as soggy and dried out as mine turned out to be. And two, I wonder, Seth, here's my hypothesis that I've just formed as you were talking. I wonder if the preponderance of video assets that we have out there now for our schools has taken away some of the need for or perceived need for a virtual tour. Because if, you know, in Mike's idea and what you were saying about the tour as a way to get to see people interact, engage, then think about all of the cool, wacky, wonderful video stuff that they can find on YouTube or on the school site in other places that might scratch the itch that they have to see more about what campus looks like. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I definitely think there's something there, for sure. I definitely think that, I don't know, this whole conversation is one, I wonder if it's semantics or language or different, and again, it goes into expectations actually perfectly. Are we providing what we want? Are we providing what the student wants? Does the student want what we provide? Do they know what we're providing? And this separation between what we think we're trying to do and what the student's actually getting out of it. If anything, actually, I think it's probably a prime example of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, writing this particular question is always a challenge for me because I'm aware more than ever that our vernacular, the words that we use to describe our business, are not the words that they live with. They don't even have words for some of the things that they're looking for or trying to experience or experiencing. And so I wonder sometimes when I'm putting survey questions together if I'm not just being too much of an adult and not pulling things apart. It's one of the challenges that I always struggle with in this study year over year. It's just, am I conveying the gist of what I'm going for in the words that I'm using? And I don't know, maybe we need to take apart this question in some different ways and ask it and still be able to build it back up into results that point to the tour, the interactive map.
And now, again, one of the things I love about this report that comes out each year that makes me think, it kind of makes me question some of my assumptions, maybe more of my personal opinions bleeding into the decisions I'm making. It kind of puts all in perspective. And one last waste that did that, one last data point I want to hit on for sure today is talking about the use of live chats and webcams specifically. I mean, wow. If you guys haven't, in my opinion, if you take away one big thing from this year, it's like, holy cow, is there a golden opportunity right now available? And it's not social, it's not mobile, it's something that's been around for a while that few of us are using. So why don't you tell us a bit about what folks were talking about with live chat and live video?
Well, first of all, Seth, I'm really excited to say I've known you for a while now, and you are the pioneer of it here for us in the grown-up sector of recruitment marketing. So thank you for doing what you do and continuing to do it really well and letting me jump in now and then. Second, I think that there are a lot of things, certainly the tool set that allows that to happen more organically than requiring them to be, here on a laptop as I happen to be at the moment, breaks down walls that were maybe there before. I think that as students have more FaceTime chats or Skype or even Google Plus Hangout experiences with each other, that the wall comes down for them in their comfort level to then have a conversation with a grown-up, an admissions counselor, or even another current student at a school. So I think it's great. It's really interesting as I'm carrying this data into my client work and engaging with my fellow marketing directors and admissions directors and talking about this. They still have a lot of fear and trepidation about doing it because they may still not be using it in their own work life or in their own personal life. And so I think it's just that experience engagement time to get over it. I thought, you and I were talking before the show started about the interesting key interest in underrepresented students in this capacity. So just to get back to the data for a tiny second, 75% of the students in our study, 2,000 kids, so 75% of them, that's a lot, said that they would talk to an admissions rep or current student using a webcam. So, wow. Why wouldn't we do that? And guess what? More of them were juniors than seniors. So you've got time. They're seniors right now, and it makes me wonder what the juniors from this class year are even more so. So 81% of juniors, 69% of seniors. That's a yes. I mean, and I wrote about this in my blog post. I don't know if you see those or not, but I really think that if schools are looking for new ways to engage, new layers, piloting something with a webcam, whether it's a one-on-one Skype between your counselors or a group thing and a hangout, or even a webcast where you're actually putting the speakers on web cameras, get in there, get going.
I could not agree more. I mean, I just got to hit the nail with the hammer one more time. I mean, we're talking about 80%. I mean, this is a massive amount of people that are open to this. That we're talking about the populations that most institutions are really fighting to recruit: lower income, minority, oftentimes first generation students, the kind of students that when brought to a campus can really help provide a really rich, diverse experience, the kind that as marketers we can then market to recruit to more students. It's one that we seek. And here we are seeing, here is a solution to a problem that most of us have, and it's one that the solution's been around for a while. And Rachel mentioned using a chat feature in the 90s, and maybe it phased. I think this is the second wave. This is the 2.0 when it comes to video. And the reason is, in my opinion, is that at the end of the day, and if T-San's watching, he's going to love me for this because it's the truth. He always says it's all about caring, and it is, but I think it's all about relationships. And I still think at the end of the day, that admissions rep plays a massive, irreplaceable role when someone is there. Who's giving the tour on campus is way more important than what you show them. I mean, they're both important, but it's about providing that personal experience, that connection. And the thing that excites me about web video, you can totally do one-on-one, which means it's no longer geo-specific. It's geographical freedom. People can be anywhere, which is great. But also, as you said, this is where I think is exciting, is when you talk about providing things where you're doing one-to-many or two or three-to-many. Here's two of us talking, but other folks are watching the live stream. That's relationships that scale. And that's really exciting.
Yeah. And it's exciting for me, too, because, I love that, just in this setting, you're evoking people that have always been enamored of, Rachel especially. And so if you can start to get that enthusiasm across and introduce people and maybe, think about it from a pre-visit experience. Hey, you're coming to campus next week. I just wanted to make sure you knew who I was when you walked into this crowded room, because I'm your counselor and I'm the person at this institution right now who's going to know your name and who's going to care about you. So let's start chatting. I mean, thinking about it that way, I think that the possibilities are endless. And what I know about the Roadrunner admissions counselor is that they are in their early 20s mostly, not all, mostly, and they are already using this stuff in their lives. You know, it's how they talk to their moms and their dads if they're not living, you know. So give them the tools. Let them try it out. Let them bring new ideas to you about how to use it.
I totally agree. I'm really excited to see where it goes. And the last thing I'll say, just because I always love tipping my hand a little bit, watch for a major SNU initiative exactly based on this to launch at the very beginning of January. I have gotten approval on something from back in the spring that I've pushed very hard for that will be a very big push in this exact arena. And the timing couldn't be better. You know, it couldn't be better. And so look for that in January. I hope it's something that has never been done before in higher ed, that is scalable web relationships like this via video and webcam. So excited to see data back up. Sometimes you have a hunch and you want to go something. You're not always right, obviously. And sometimes this data, when I read this report, I'm like, oh, man, why isn't everyone exactly like me? And why don't they like the things I like? And then other times you think, okay, you know what? I had a hunch, and now data's backing it up. And you got to, you know, take your licks when you lose and take the pats on the back when you get it right. And either way, again, that's why I love this report every year, because we can have those kind of conversations. And I think it kind of is a grounding and a baseline for all those brainstorms and throwing things out all year long. It kind of brings you back down to earth a little bit and says, let's have a concrete conversation. Because, again, I'll keep saying it. I think we need to have a meeting about brochures. I think listen, if we're doing it and people want it, either we should stop doing it and say we're taking the high road, or if we're going to do it, let's do it different than we have in the past 10 years and find a way to make it better. So it's those kind of conversations, I think, that are always spurred from this kind of research, which is just really exciting.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that it kind of gets your juices going. I'm so excited to see whatever it is that you're doing in January. So whenever you feel like you can clue me in, you know, I'll keep it too close to the vest. But it's exciting.
Awesome. So listen, we had a few other points that we didn't quite hit on, but I think we hit on all the main ones that I wanted to tackle. If you guys are looking for other information on things like text messaging, more information on social media, campus calendars, you know, the role of parents, things like that, I'm going to send a link out again to the report. I'm sure you've seen it, but if not, just read it again. There's just so much in there, and it'll be the best hour you spend of your week, I promise you, if you actually spend time not thinking about what you're doing, but you think about why you're doing it, and you have data to back those kind of things up. So, you know, with that, I guess I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show again. You know, I'm booking you right now for next year already. It's on the calendar, 2013, 2014. This is the new annual tradition.
Count on me for sure. And, you know, we're doing a lot of new things with e-expectations coming down the road. So we kind of dabbled with it last fall, winter, with some trend reports. And we're going to be doing a lot more of that. Look for some data on guidance counselors. Remember how important they were this year. So we're going to dig into that. We're going to do a lot more in mobile. We're going to do some things with students of color from the original data set and also moving forward. And so let's not make it a whole year, Seth. Let's make it regular occurrence.
You have an ongoing open invitation to come on the show as often as you would like. It is there for the taking. I promise you that. I would love to have you on again very soon.
Cool. I'll do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Stephanie, so much. Thank you guys for watching. I'm back next week with a show all about #NYU, what NYU is doing on the ground with social media to help their students not only explore campus, but explore New York City as well. It's kind of cool. It is very integrated. It's one of those campaigns that wraps a whole lot of things up into one nice, tightly wound little bow. We'll break that down and talk all about it. And then we're going to be also rolling out a whole slew of content coming out through October. The rest of the calendar's coming up soon at higheredlive.com. Lastly, a bit of personal note because, well, that's just, you know, the way we are. I can't see you all, but I know you're there. Monday, we're launching the new SNHU TV commercial. You can watch it right at snhu.edu. It's been a massive amount of work. Cat's out of the bag. I'm actually doing the voiceover. I'm now then a voiceover guy. I did the demo, and clients liked it, and we couldn't find anybody else. So you'll be hearing me in your TVs on Monday, we're running nationwide. It'll be over at snhu.edu as well. So I just wanted to share a bit of a big personal moment. I know you guys share so many with me, both on the show, on Twitter, behind the scenes, so I wanted to be able to do that as well. And thank you all for being patient. As for the past few months, I've been doing a lot of shows on Wednesdays, on Thursdays, afternoons, Thursday nights. I've been all over the board. My schedule is going to hopefully come down to earth, and I will wrangle it and bring you back the content on a more regular schedule. But in the meantime, thank you as always for watching Higher Ed Live. I do appreciate it. This and every single episode we have ever done, and we are cracking 100, is available over at higheredlive.com. Thank you guys, and have a great night.